Our last lecture, we talked about focus and what is the primary element in your composition, as well as generating a flow in your design so that the primary element leads to the secondary and tertiary and etc., etc., so that your eye moves through the various elements of your composition flawlessly with the beautiful ease. And that's called visual hierarchy that you are basically determining. So I'm going to give you a little bit, few more examples just to continue that and then move into the next, part that is connected, obviously. A key element to any good composition is a strong focal point, as it helps your viewer's eyes naturally settle on the important pieces of your design when whatever is first. In these two examples, it's clear where is the main focus and how that focus, this example is a little bit, I would say, controversial because the negative space that creates that fin of like a whale makes my eye want to go up, but then the eye kind of falls back down onto the text. So the flow is not as natural because of the jump that occurs up here. Still pretty nicely done. Here the focus is right here on the vessel and is a beautiful flow because you want to move up to look at that beautiful moon and then down onto the text. I think this is a very well done hierarchy. And even here, a little bit because everything is centered, you see that the primary focus, you see exactly where it is located. Find your focus. That's kind of what ultimately that lesson was all about. When choosing your focal point, keep in mind that the main goal of any design is communication. And here there are a few more examples, and again, that also shows you how things are not oftentimes in the center, right? We'll talk about something called the rule of third, but also rules are made to be broken. Sometimes actually things do work out best in the center. So we're going to talk about both. So your design is telling a specific story and you want to make sure that is clear and understood. Again, here we have an example. In fact, let's actually talk about the rule of third. Let me go into the part, in which you can see the rule of third right here, compositional skills. And this is actually something I found online, but it's quite important because it does illustrate what we want to focus on today. To make the frame visually interesting, that's why you're making decision in terms of visual hierarchy. You want to make something that is aesthetically pleasing, and this is the first step before lighting or anything else, is decide where do the elements go in your composition. How do you decide? The strategies are using the rule of third, diagonal rule, being minimalistic, use obviously always correct perspectives, and then use line patterns and curves to generate emotions. This is the rule of third. You take your image or your composition, divide it into three parts, horizontally and vertically, and put the main elements, the focus should go onto these intersections. Let's see. For example, this boat is right in the middle right now, as you can see, but if I move it to the side, now there's a problem with moving it to the side in this case, is that the boat gets crammed so close to the edge of your composition that things are not working out as well. You can see that, right? So if you move it, instead of using this top intersection, you use the bottom intersection and your boat now is down here, it works a lot better for your composition. Here there are more examples of using those intersections to put elements that are to be emphasized. Same here. Right now the grid has disappeared, but you can see that this element is at the bottom intersection of the rule of third. Same here on the side. Also, looking space is very important. So whenever you have a characters or an element that is looking in a certain direction, which direction do you have them, point at? Empty space on the side where the subject is looking, facing, or talking is always very much something you want to do because it's less constricted and because it's very important in cinematography. Some of these rules are for general composition, so apply, for example, to film and cinema. This is an example. This dancer is looking this direction where there's a lot of empty space. Same for this example. This one is a little bit interesting, right? Because she's facing this direction, but she's looking this direction. But as you can see, the empty space is here. And again, we're looking at the rule of third here. Her eyes are on that top third in vertically and 1/3 on the horizontal side. Do not put a subject in the middle is telling you here, but is it okay that is looking into an area that is very, very restricted? It doesn't look right, right? So this is an image that shows you how if you move your character but is looking in an area that is kind of very limited, it doesn't work that well. Though rules are meant to be broken, like I said earlier. So there will be times in which, in this case, why does it work? It works because there is a diagonal that kind of drives the focus, drives the tension. I think the diagonal is what, in this case, really makes the difference. Same here, this little girl is looking this direction where there's very little space, and it actually just makes her more kind of like fragile, I think. Motion space. When you have something in motion, the empty space needs to be on the side where the subject is walking or running or moving toward, because it heightens the feeling of motion. This is the example. You can see that. Or this. Or this. Diagonal rule. Subject is placed on the diagonal line of the frame. Adds drama and action. Examples of this. And this applies to design as well. I mean, these are photographs, but it does apply to design as well. Minimalism, this more than ever applies to design. You want to remove clutter. I generally build up my design on with every element on separate layer, on very many layers in Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign. And then I turn off layers, make them invisible and decide if that element truly belongs there and needs to be in the composition. You want to have a prominent subject and you want it to be very eye-catching. Here's an example. Another example. Obviously, you want to have a correct perspective, and remember, you can use high angle shot, low angle shot, and then obviously down to subject level. This is very important for cinematography, but think about also for design. In the middle in which you have a character or an element that is a person in your design, even a character you designed, the mascot of something. You can decide how to frame that character to make him look more diminished, like in this case, when you have a high angle shot, the character looks really diminished. When you have a low angle shot, the character looks very dominating. And then eye level is much more friendly, it relates to that person. And then we can obviously use patterns, and we can use angled horizons. What does that do? It gives kind of a sense of unease, of uncertainty. It makes you kind of like feel like you don't want to be there, right? And versus when you have an horizon that is flat and horizontal, we talked about this last class, you have this sense of peace. And these are examples how when you want to use the rule of third instead of slapping the character in the center. The second rules, direct the eye with leading lines. And we talked about that just a minute ago when we were talking about diagonal lines, horizontal lines for the horizon versus slanted diagonal line for the horizon. So it's kind of tying it all to that. A common use of leading lines that you might be pretty familiar with is within flowcharts. Flowcharts use lines to direct your eye from one point to the next. Check out this save the date card by a paper and parcel that uses flowcharts leading line to present information in a fun and unique way. When I find example, oftentimes I credit obviously who did it. Leading lines can also guide you to various elements. Like in this case, what does this text do? It leads you to this element. I also think that this might be actually the eye-catching element, and then it leads you to the lines. Remember, it can go both ways. As discussed, you want the eye to first land on the main focal point, but then where does it go? So remember, you choose the primary element, but then you use lines that can be actually a piece of text that also is a line. I mean, look at here, right? This is a line as well as text, right? But you want to use lines to then drive the attention of the viewer. This is actually a beautiful city. I love aerial views of cities because all the streets are lined that lead to something. By positioning and adjusting your leading lines, you can not only direct the eye to the focal point, but your design, but also throughout the rest of your design. I apologize. I got a little notification that got me distracted. This is an interesting image too, and here again there is the use of the white or negative space that kind of leads the eye, as well as these curves. These curves, you know, the interaction between the two and the negative space between the two creates a beautiful tension, directing the eye with leading lines. An example of this is seen in this poster from Trick Pony that uses the line along the man's left arm to draw the eye to and from the logo and then down the rest of the image. In this way, the shapes of the image have been used to direct the eye. It's totally true. You first want to go up here, follow his arm, land into the logo, go down to see the rest of the image. Beautiful flow. The eye knows always where to go. There's never any never uncertainty. Love these example too. I don't know if you've seen this movie, by the way. Is amazing. If you haven't, please rent it. Brazil, look how gorgeous these lines are and how they create this sense of depth and kind of like tension. Same here. These lines are creating the tension and are definitely the focus, right? In here, the focus is Brazil. All the skyscraper are pointing to it. In here, the focus is this three-dimensional, beautiful type, and then everything spins around it. More example of lines that drive the attention. This one is kind of more of a center example, but it's clear these two lines that define the arm of the figure are very, very, very strong. And then you kind of find these gorgeous silhouettes above and below. This one, though, is kind of harder. The flow is not as straightforward, the eye flow, versus here is very clear. You want to read and then follow the silhouette down to the character. It's really, really nice. Now, someone might tell me the opposite, that they find this all the empty space around the character, the negative space, making this character stand out, and then you go and find this gorgeous silhouette that winds up to the text. So there might be two different ways to read your design, but it's clear that these two elements, the silhouette and the silhouette of the man and the silhouette of the dragon, are the focus. I feel the dragon is the primary one, mainly because it's bigger, it's a lot bigger. Remember, scale really makes it huge. Here we are, scale. Rule number 3, and then we should talk about this one next time.